I'm Mike Attilius, the head football coach at the Catholic University of America. In all my years of coaching and as a Catholic, whether it's football or striving to be with the Lord, I've realized that the process is the same. The rules are the same. And St. Ignatius has given us a powerhouse playbook.
The spiritual life really is a struggle. There are ups and there are downs, times of energy and times of discouragement. And we're going to look at St. Ignatius of Loyola's explanation and teaching about that. And probably the best way to start this is by just looking for a moment at St. Ignatius himself and how he came to this teaching. St. Ignatius, until the age of 30, he was pretty far from God, never doubted his Catholic faith. But a gentle way to say it is that in those years, there probably were not many of the 10 Commandments that he didn't break in some pretty serious way. For example, when he was 24, he goes back to his native town up in northwestern Spain, and that night, together with one of his brothers, commits what the legal document simply calls an enormous crime. It's discovered, he immediately flees, or he would have certainly fallen into the hands of the law, as he eventually did. And then maybe just one more example. We also have documents showing us in those years that for 3 consecutive years, Ignatius asks permission of the King of Spain to carry a sword in public and to be accompanied by 2 attendants. And the reason that he gives is that there is a man who is utterly determined to take his life. And this man actually takes steps toward that goal. Obviously, Ignatius did something pretty serious to annoy this man to that degree. We also have witnesses who tell us of a time when a group of young men pushed Ignatius up against the wall, and if he had not been restrained, he would have drawn his sword and either killed or been killed. So this is Ignatius until the age of 30. Very worldly, filled with dreams of romantic exploits and deeds of chivalry, kind of like the knights in his day, feats of arms and so forth, not much focus on God at all. And then when he's 30, in battle, his right leg is shattered by a cannonball. And Ignatius has 3 surgeries before the doctors are done. They're painful. Obviously, the first 2 surgeries don't go well. And this involves months and months of time in convalescence on his sickbed. And so, in order to pass the time, Ignatius asks for books to read. And his sister-in-law gives him the only 2 books that she has. One is a volume with lives of the saints, and another a volume with the life of Christ. And somewhat unwillingly, but to pass the time, he begins to read and finds that he gets very interested in what he's reading. Really what's happening is that for the first time in his life, he's discovering another way to be heroic, other than the knights and romance and feats of arms and so forth. And he finds himself thinking, what if I were to live the way St. Francis of Assisi lived, or the way St. Dominic lived, these heroic men and women who did such great things for God. And he tells us in his autobiography that what started to happen was an alternation. Let's say one day on his convalescent bed, he'd spend hours thinking of what he calls a worldly project. And this was the pursuit of a woman. He never names her, never said too much more about this. In all likelihood, this was Catherine, the younger daughter of the King of Spain, whom Ignatius, in the way society was structured in his day, would never even have a chance to meet. So there's a note of unreality, but he spends hours and hours and hours pondering how he's going to win the heart of this woman. And then on other days, he spends hours and hours and hours pondering about living like the saints. So what's happening is that he's considering 2 very different directions of life. One which is the old way, and it focuses on this, in practice, unattainable woman. And the other is something very new, and that is, let's call it a holy project, living like the saints. After weeks and weeks have gone by like this, one day something dawns on Ignatius. While I'm thinking about whether the worldly project or the holy project, both sets of thoughts are really engaging. They're interesting. They awaken enthusiasm and energy, delight in me. But no matter how engaging a set of thoughts are, just humanly, eventually you get tired, you let the thoughts go and go on with the day. And he notices that what happens after he lets the one set of thoughts go and the other set of thoughts go, now what happens is very different on the level of his heart. After he's been thinking about the worldly project with all the engagement and energy, now when the day goes on, his heart's empty, unhappy. It's too little, it's superficial. Very reverently, have you ever felt that? But whereas when he's been thinking like the saints, about living like the saints, he notices that after he lets those thoughts go and goes on with the day, his heart remains happy, fulfilled, content. Now that he sees it, he works with this until he comes to understand that thoughts about living in a certain way which are engaging while he's thinking about them, but which always leave him empty, does not have the feel of where God is leading in his life. Whereas another set of thoughts, which are very engaging while he's thinking about them, living like the saints, and continue to make his heart happy even afterward, and this consistently, that does have the feel of where God is leading in his life. Once he understands this, he takes action accordingly. As soon as his leg is healed, he sets off, leaves home, leaves everything, goes to a Benedictine monastery with the help of a Benedictine priest, prepares for 3 days, makes a life-changing confession, goes down to a nearby city, begins to lives with the poor, serving the poor, going to Mass each day, returning in the evening to the churches, and spending many hours each day praying with Jesus, and growing by leaps and bounds spiritually. He goes on pilgrimage to Jerusalem, returns, and begins the studies that will eventually lead him to become the founder of the Jesuits and the saint that we know him to be. Now let's ask this question. What if Ignatius had never been aware of these thoughts and the stirrings in his heart relative to them, had never noticed it, never been able to understand what was of God and not of God in it, and never taken action accordingly? How different his life would have been. And this is his invitation to us, because in your heart too, every day, today, every day in your life, thoughts are stirring, things are stirring in your heart. And if you can notice them, become aware of them, and work with them, and we're going to give you lots of tools following St. Ignatius to do that until you can understand what's of God and what he wants you to follow, and what's not of God and what he doesn't want you to follow. And then you can act accordingly, accepting, putting into practice what is from God, and firmly rejecting what is not of God so that it can never harm you. If you can begin to do this in your life, wonderful things will happen. The same two things will happen in your life that happened in the life of St. Ignatius. A beautiful step of growth and holiness. You'll find that you're coming closer and closer to the Lord who loves you. And then secondly, your life will be, as his so powerfully was, a source of renewal in the spiritual life for others. And that's our goal in this, Ignatius wants to set us free from the thoughts and stirrings of our hearts, which can only lead to emptiness and sadness, and show us how to recognize and follow the thoughts that will lead us very surely toward God. In our next segment, we're going to begin to look at his teaching on how we can do this.